First of all, I want to thank you all for attending today. We're really excited. This is our first annual inaugural assessment symposium. And it has been a wonderful way for all of us to share assessments that we have done within the Division of Student Affairs, and also an opportunity to share with our colleagues who have done research on the theme that we have today, which is international students. My name is Pat Toby. I'm Associate Dean in Academic Support, and I'm here on behalf of the Student Affairs Assessment Committee to introduce the program for today. You should have an 8-page brochure that you received when you checked in, and also this wonderful bookmark. I'm doing show and tell here. That has an announcement on the front part. We have consultants available during those days and times that you can drop in at Student Union 301, and we can work with you on what components that you're trying to do on your own assessments. We also have on the back side the 5-step assessment cycle and other information which is located in our website, which is at the bottom of this bookmark and also the back of the brochure. We have concurrent sessions going on today. We have 2 case rooms, this room and the one right next to it. So as you see in your program, whatever session you choose to go to, then you will go to either one of these rooms. Our final session for the day will be held in this room, and then will be the end of our presentations. We expect to be ending by 5 o'clock. We also have some refreshments to keep your strength throughout the next 4 hours. And of course some short breaks between the sessions to help keep us focused, as well as a moment to chat with your colleagues. The final closing sessions I mentioned will be held in this room. Knowing that this is an assessment approach, we'll also have a assessment survey that we'll send out to you after the program. You receive it in your email. So we appreciate your thoughts and to take a few moments in filling it out. With that said, I'd also like to describe a little bit about our assessment committee. It began about 5 or 6 years ago, somewhere around there. It may be longer. I've sort of lost touch with how the years speed by. But Ray Gonzalez was co-chair with me. Now, Ray, are you here? Yeah, there you are, Ray. Everybody knows Ray from, he worked in the registrar's office, and he recently accepted a position. You've been how long at Caltech now? About 9 months. Oh wow, time does fly, right? But he's the director of institutional research at Caltech, and as you can see, we still keep in touch, and we do miss you, Ray. But we're very happy that you're at Caltech doing such a wonderful work over there. The committee is usually comprised of 6 or 8 dedicated members each year, many of whom continued on our committee more than 1 year. And this is just, I call au gratis. In other words, they have other responsibilities, obviously, in the roles that they have and the work that they do here at USC. But they have, these members have a keen interest in looking at assessment and the outcomes of our programs and services. And also, they're very interested in educating others or consulting, being available to help others who are trying to pursue the same goals of evidence of the work that we do. The members are comprised of individuals in student affairs, graduate students who are completing field placements and assessment, and also members outside of student affairs, such as academic records, Marshall School of Business, Rossier School of Education, and so forth. These individuals have given workshops on assessment, assisted in the assessment process, and provided consultations throughout the year. This year, there was a dedicated interest in exploring how to better assist our international students, and by developing assessments of their programs and a series of the outcome surveys and other one-on-one interviews, focus groups, and etc. about what the international students' expectations are, and also what their satisfaction is, and other remarks that we can get in not only a quantitative but a qualitative format that helps inform us of the needs of our students. I want to especially thank, and if you'd please stand when I call your name, the following individuals made this first Student Affairs Assessment Symposium possible. Jade Agawa, she might be out at the table. Shannon Farris, and she is from Marshall School of Business, who got this 2 case rooms for us, and she's probably at the front reception area. Janice Shafrick. Janice, are you here? Najib Al-Samara, are you here, Najib? Emmy Sumida. Paula Swinford. Paula, are you here? Chrissy Roth, are you? Carol Schmitz, I think Carol's away at a conference, and as well as Victor Kearney from Residential Education. Jack Trump. Jack, are you here? He'll be joining us a little bit later. Ann Kaufman. Are you here, Ann? And Suman Pedicure. Is Sumi here? Okay, she'll be joining us a little bit later. And especially to our keynote speaker, Dr. Sandra Daniels, who I'll introduce in just a moment. I also want to thank colleagues in the Office of Institutional Research here at USC, the Registrar's Office, and the Office of Admissions. These folks have provided us with data and other types of information, and they dedicated their valuable time, because they have a lot of other things they're doing here at the university, to helping us put together these data sets, extractions, we call them data set extractions, and excerpts for our institutional surveys. So it takes a lot of time to pick through a lot of the surveys that the university provides for our students, to take out those components and variables that can be of interest, and in this case for international students. Their contribution is just tremendous, and I thank them very much. Okay, one of the goals is to assessment is to consult with staff so they can facilitate programs and services I mentioned before. The goal is that everybody, as they learn how to do this, can be self-assessors who are knowledgeable and can identify the skills and tools needed to perpetually evaluate the programs, performance, and student outcomes. We want to be transparent, and that's very important when you do this type of work, is to be transparent to the university as a whole. And therefore, that's why, one of the reasons why we decided to have this symposium, so we can share our information with you. This academic year, during the Western Association of Schools and Colleges accreditation process, several examples of assessment were provided by Student Affairs. In the response from the WASC committee back to USC, they stated the following. The examples demonstrated the exemplary collaboration between Division of Student Affairs staff, the Academic Information Officer, and Outcomes research staff to conduct assessments of students' experiences and needs. And that the data collection expertise and resources developed by the Assessment Center not be lost as the university centralizes its institutional research functions. With that said, I hope you find this information valuable and shed some light on the services and support to our international students as we go through the day. I want to now, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Sandra Daniels. She is one of our own alumni here from USC. Go Trojans, right? She graduated from the Rossier School of Ed with a doctorate in higher education leadership. Her research pertained to the effects of diversity courses on international students from China and Hong Kong, with a focus of inter-peer group relations. She'll explain more about the Teagle grant and other researchers here at USC who worked on this all-encompassing larger project. Dr. Daniels oversees the units of university housing and others that you can read on your program. She does this in her role as Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at California State University, Dominguez Hills. She also, and I do have to mention this though, student conduct, the Office of Student Life, international programs, veteran student programs, how do you do this all? And the Multicultural Center. She also coordinates the division's assessment initiatives and works on strategic planning. Prior to Cal State University Dominguez Hills, Dr. Daniels worked at Cal State University Northridge as Associate Director of Student Development and International Programs. So her expertise is very valuable in what we are going to look at today. She was also responsible for the management of the International Exchange Student Center and other programs such as fraternity, sorority, life, volunteer programs, clubs, and organizations. She's an avid world traveler. She has sailed on 2 voyages with the Institute for Shipboard Education Seminar at Sea program, and I think we have a couple other people here that have done this. All right.
Everyone should go.
And she also received her career in residence life, having worked at Tulane University, UC Santa Barbara, and UC San Diego, Thurgood Marshall College. She received her bachelor's in business administration from Texas Christian University, Master's of Arts in higher ed from New York University, and her doctorate, as I mentioned before, from here. I know that she also has her interests specifically with international students and her great commitment to diversity and student engagement opportunities. So there are many learning moments that she provides in her, from her extensive travels around the world and the focus on her research and what she shares with us. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Sandra.
Some assistance here.
Go to view, up top, view,
Yeah.
slideshow.
Oh,
There,
back to
from
view.
beginning, from beginning, right there.
All right. Over.
Look to the left,
To your,
underneath
Right.
the...
Wait, no, you're right.
yay!
I have a wonderful group of people that always work with me. So sometimes we know what our skill sets are. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pat, first of all, for inviting me in to talk with you today. It's always an opportunity. Anytime I get to speak about international students, I love that. It's a passion for me. I will exude that enthusiasm to you for the next 25, 30 minutes in terms of the importance of international students, the knowledge and educational experiences that they bring to our institutions, the relationships and knowledge they bring to interact with our students on our campuses, and then just the interactions in terms of the market, in terms of what our students that are domestic students gain from them in terms of their learning as well. So kind of where we're going to go today. First of all, kind of not knowing who my audience was going to be, I took a step back and I wanted to share with you, first of all, who are our international students, just from the national view of some information from the Open Doors report from the Institute of International Education. Secondly, I'm going to review with you the particular study that I was a part of here in Rossier School of Education that looked at students from China and Hong Kong in terms of their inter-peer relationships. And then finally, if we have time for some discussions, I want to look at what are some of the implications for you in terms of the programs and services that you work with, and in terms of how they go about supporting international students and their experiences here on your campus, particularly here at USC. So first of all, who are our international students that are coming to study in the United States? This is from the 2010 Institute of International Education Open Doors report. Okay? For this past year, and this is from 09-10 data, there are a total of 690,923 international students studying in the U.S. You can see that the top countries are represented by China, India, South Korea, Canada, and Taiwan. One thing to mention, that this is the first year that China took over the #1 spot. It had originally been India for a number of years. So that is a significant change for the number of international students coming to the U.S. The top states, not a surprise, California is a great destination for our international students, followed by New York, Texas, Massachusetts, and Illinois. So the bulk of our students are clustered in those 5 states in the United States. So the top institutions. Number 1, participation is good. You all should know that USC hosts the largest number of international students in our country, roughly almost 8,000 students. That is a large number of students. Followed by the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, New York University, my alma mater, Purdue University, their main campus, and then finally Columbia University has the 5th spot. So many large research institutions. Very important to also kind of share what are these students coming to study in terms of their time here in the United States. Business and management has consistently remained the #1 program for international students, followed closely by engineering, the physical and life sciences, math and computer science, and then 5th place is the social sciences. And then the primary source of funding. This I always look at in terms of, it helps you understand some of the economic and sometimes social class backgrounds of our international students that come to study here, because we know that it's expensive for them. So almost 62% of them have personal and family finances that are supporting their education here in the U.S. Followed by the U.S. College or University, 24.1%. That you might see as representative of students that may be in graduate programs in terms of fellowships and different mechanisms there. And then finally, home government or university. Sometimes there are government-sponsored scholarships. Some particular countries, that's how they come, particularly students. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia are 2 of the largest ones that have a lot of government-sponsored scholarships. Some just highlights to kind of note as I was kind of reviewing the data to share with you. As I noted, the record high number of international students in the U.S. We did go through a couple years of declining enrollments. You can see that trend post 9/11. You can see it when some of the economic issues happened around the world. But we are starting to go back on the increase. Chinese student enrollment increased 30% from the 2009 report in 1 year. Students that are coming from China. So that is our burgeoning market of understanding what these student experiences are going to bring for our campuses. Graduate enrollment is up 4%, and undergraduate enrollment is up 2%. So more graduate students are coming as international students. And definitely you see that represented here at USC. 6% increase of students in non-degree programs. Those are programs that we look at when we think about certificate programs and exchanges. Less of them are in terms of the English language. So it also tells you the students are wanting to come and they're coming for a shorter period of time versus coming for a BA or for a master's or a PhD. And the international students contribute $20 billion to the U.S. economy. So a major driving force of dollars that come in to support our company. So that's a little bit about the landscape overall in terms of international student populations. Wanted to highlight for you some data that I found just here on USC. So in terms of who's your local population. Once again, China represents your largest population at 28.1%, followed by, very closely by India, South Korea, Taiwan, Canada, and Hong Kong. And this is from your USC at a glance report. And there's a lot of different data on there that will also talk to you about the differences between your freshman population, your transfer students, as well as your graduates. Because we have to keep in mind that there are different experiences at different types of students. A freshman may be looking at different experiences than a transfer student, as well as graduate students may come with families with them or other dependents as well. So the fun part, I get to talk to you about the study that I was engaged with here at USC. First of all, this is a part of a larger diversity course project. So just to make sure and recognize my fellow peers and graduates that worked very closely with me on this. The faculty we worked with were Dr. Darnell Cole, Melora Sant, and Dr. Patricia Toby. And then our student researchers are there as well. Kevin is in the room today. So if you have any other questions, Kevin can talk to you about his study. But overall, we were looking at the impact of diversity courses. But each one of the students on our project looked at a specific population. So I chose to look at international students. Emily looked at relational leadership among Latino and African American students. We had one student that looked at service learning and engagement around diversity courses. So we all took a different piece, but tied it back to what diversity courses may have meant for those students. So what we were kind of tasked to do was, one, to understand the purpose of the diversity course. We know that about 67% of colleges and universities have a diversity course requirement, and USC is very fortunate to be one of those institutions that has one. You may remember in the media, maybe in the past 6 months to a year, there have been a number of instances, UC San Diego, UCLA, in terms of institutions that don't have a requirement dealing with incidents that happen on their campus. So it still speaks to the need for what diversity courses can bring to student learning on the college campus. Is the requirement meeting the intended goals? Is what we count what we really ought to count in terms of student learning? And how do we go about assessing that in terms of the learning outcomes for diversity courses? So what all did we do in this diversity course project? It was pretty detailed. This was part of a 3-year grant from the Teagle Foundation, as well as was part of working with USC and their WASC accreditation out of the Provost area. So we looked at the course syllabi from about 115 diversity courses here on campus. We developed a diversity course typology. I'll share a little bit more with that as we go through the presentation. We looked at instructor and course ratings of those diversity courses. We held faculty interviews, so faculty that were teaching diversity courses, student focus groups. We did individual student interviews, as well as we worked with a lot of institutional surveys, the SERP, the CSEQ, USC's own senior survey. We looked at transcript and admissions data. I remember Ray Turner coming in and doing some work with us. The CLA, which is an online critical thinking assessment tool that we did as well. And then we designed our own individual diversity survey. The diversity survey was a bit more localized to look at how students were impacted by some of those pre-variables to college. When you think about their compositions of their high schools, the compositions of their neighborhoods, did that lend to how diversity courses impacted them and their relationships in those courses? So that's the big picture. Okay. Western University, pseudonym of course, but roughly just a little bit about the campus. There are 33,500 students here, undergraduate and graduate. A little bit about the campus demographics, and 51% female. So one of the foundations that guided our work is that we created a diversity typology. So if we look at all of the 115 syllabi that our diversity team went through to rate. So basically USC has a diversity course requirement, and of that requirement there are 5 different dimensions. The first looks at the dimensions of human diversity. A third of the course addresses diversity. Personal reflection of students' attitudes, that some piece of that course has personal reflection. The syllabi reflect contemporary issues that students may be dealing with around race, ethnicity, class, religion, ability, and then the review of analytical thinking around diversity. So those are the campus's 5 areas of how a course gets selected to be in, to meet the diversity requirement. So taking each course syllabi, we compared that to those 5 criteria to come up with a typology for those courses. And so you will see that we categorized those based on the mean and standard deviation into introductory diversity courses, basic diversity courses, intermediate, and then more advanced courses. So that enabled us to, when we interviewed students or worked with faculty, to get a sense of what that particular course was, and knowing that if it was an advanced course, we knew that it talked about a lot more critical issues. There may have been a lot more reflection in that course, whereas an introductory course may have just kind of barely gotten into some of the major issues that we deal with in our contemporary society. So my Pacific study, the effects of diversity courses on international students from China and Hong Kong, and specifically I wanted to look at if diversity courses and the knowledge they gained in that course and the understanding about U.S. diversity, did that help them interact with their peers more in the classroom environment? So why was this study important? As I mentioned, U.S. is the top destination for international students. China represents, it was number 2 at that time, but now represents the largest population of international students. To contribute to the literature beyond transitional issues. It was very disappointing to me as an international educator that when you scour the literature, it's all about transitional issues and all the difficulties around learning the language, adjusting to the home country, different learning styles. And so there's more to international students than the difficulties that we see in a lot of the literature. So I wanted to look at something different, in terms of something a little bit more about student learning and relationships. Understand how international students experience U.S. diversity. We all know for the U.S. that we have a history in our country, no matter how long you've been here, that there are different dynamics of different ethnic and cultural groups, different state dynamics, class issues, political issues. And so being an international student, you're coming into the U.S. and it's a new context for you. So some of these things you may have only seen YouTube, TV shows, a lot of those places that we may find that students have a lot of traditional stereotypes of what it means to be in the U.S. and to study here. So I wanted to help understand those experiences. The particular outcomes of diversity courses for those students, and then how diversity courses support intergroup peer relationships. The particular research questions, diversity courses contribute to students' intergroup peer relationships. And then how did those peer relationships vary by the student's level of acculturation? Acculturation is studied a lot in terms of international students' adjustment to the U.S. And so I wanted to see if their level of acculturation in terms of how long they had been here, in terms of their study, if that impacted how they could build relationships. Conceptual framework. Diversity typology was our first framework. I shared that with you earlier in terms of the 4 different levels of how we categorize diversity courses on the campus. I looked at Bennett's genres of research in multicultural education. There are actually 12 of those genres that study multicultural education, but specifically I was looking at understanding classroom climate as well as the cultural styles in teaching and learning. So what did those 2 genres impact in diversity course learning? Intergroup contact hypothesis. This is by Alport. Basically, there are conditions when groups are put together that let us know will they develop relationships with each other. Is there equal status among those interactions? Does the group have common goals? Is there intergroup cooperation that's required? And then what are the support of the authorities in building that relationship? So in this capacity, it's the TAs in the classroom or the faculty teaching those courses. And then finally, there was a new status added in terms of friendship potential by Pettigrew. So if after all of that, do individuals when they're interacting have the ability to build a friendship? And that's the ultimate stage of intergroup contact. Also looked at Guerin, Day, Hurtado, and Guerin in terms of informal interactional diversity, as well as the classroom diversity. Classroom diversity will speak to what's the diversity among the peers in the course. And if there are more students of color or individuals representing diverse groups, does that impact the ability for students to build peer relationships? And then finally, the acculturation framework by Berry. In terms of looking at, there are 4 different areas of that. Integration, an individual is able to integrate both their own culture and the new culture that they're a part of. Separation is going to tell you that I'm going to totally separate. I'm only going to stay in my own home country in terms of that culture. Assimilation means that I've left my values in terms of my home group, and I totally wanted to assimilate with the country and culture that I'm a part of now. And then marginalization says basically that I don't identify with either one of my home country, culture, or the country that I'm studying in. So that's the conceptual framework with any research. I'm sure many of you have been involved in research of like understanding what literature is going to help guide you to align with as you're going through doing studies. So who were my students? They were fabulous, wonderful. thanks to many of the colleagues that helped me gather them. I had 12 students that were a part of my study, and I conducted individual interviews with them. 8 of the students were from Hong Kong, and 4 of them were from China. I can tell you that the majority of them were juniors and seniors. I only had 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores. 5 of them were transfer students. So it was really interesting to get a sense of experiences for transfer students coming into the Los Angeles area and the institution and some of that background. And they had been in the U.S. anywhere from 3 months to 4 years. The freshman student had just arrived that fall semester. Some of the different diversity courses that they were taking, diversity in the classical Western tradition, Los Angeles and the American dream, social problems, minority mental health, social issues and gender, changing family forms, social inequality, class status and power, and sociology of childhood. I would tell you that the majority of my participants were in the intermediate and advanced level course. So that kind of let me know where they were along that continuum. And then I used an acculturation scale that was designed specifically for Asian international students. This was by Gu, Han, and Hu. And so basically it was a 33 instrument item that gauged the student's acculturation level. So I used that as a part of my mixed method study. So what did I find? And I passed out to you earlier, because there's going to be a slide, you're not going to really be able to read some of the more specifics. But I wanted to kind of highlight for you the general themes that I found in terms of my interviews. There were 5 key areas that came out really strong in my interviews with the students. First was how they define diversity. Second was where did they gain their U.S. diversity knowledge prior to coming to the United States. Third, what kind of understanding did they gain about diversity from the particular courses? And then the last 2, in terms of the intergroup peer relationships, I grouped those in terms of what they were able to gain in terms of the classroom experience. And then secondly, what were some of the interpersonal related, the friendship aspects, the relationships that were occurring in the classroom. And I chose 2 particular quotes to highlight for you to share. First of all, being the influence of the media. This was by far where the majority of the students got their knowledge about the U.S. What I know of the ethnicity of people in the U.S. would be from the movies, because that was my sole connection to the States not being here, and TV shows also. Brittany's a senior psychology major from Hong Kong. And on your handout, another quote I'll read for you. First of all, we get everything from TV. And I was not aware of the amount of Latino people here. I knew it was a mixture of black and white people, also people not afraid to call themselves gay. I guess that's a part of diversity, black, gay, and straight. So the diversity knowledge represented a lot of different areas in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of religion differences, in terms of sexuality. Rarely did I find, and it was kind of, I guess maybe disheartening. Sometimes we don't look at ability issues as much in diversity as we probably should have, or some of the gender differences that may come in terms of diversity. Second would be the changing of the attitudes. This is from a student, Lisa, who's a senior business major from China. He is very nice, and he changed my ideas to black people. With women, I'm okay, but with black guys, I feel scared. But the guy from my discussion is very nice, and before discussion, I don't talk to black people. He just changed my mind about blacks. That quote is very typical of many of the responses that I got from students. Here is, I guess, the first time that they're confronted with a personal situation that may shatter a stereotype they may have held, that may have come from pop culture, from media, from TV shows, about students and about the U.S. Ethnic populations. One particular quote I'll also read. We talk about different classes. Working class and people in poverty. And some people will never get out of poverty. America is shaped as a society where it's supposed to be classless. And that's why it's really surprising when we realize American society is really segregated into classes. So many of the students talked about understanding class differences that maybe were not as vivid to them in their home country. Another quote I'll read for you is under the intergroup peer relationships with the classroom-related aspects. I think that by far the largest activity that impacted them was the ability to be in small groups in their discussion sections. They will tell you that the large lecture halls, they didn't get a chance to interact as much because they were really being lectured at. But in the discussion groups with 20 or 30 with their TAs, that's where they were able to build those relationships and break down the material that was presented to them, or a film that was presented to them in class, or a book they were reading. I interact with my peers more in discussion. It's a smaller group. You can ask questions. It's really open. Our TA is a part of the group. It's free and it's engaging. So it spoke to the relationships the TAs had with these students and able to build relationships in these smaller groups. The second piece was the acculturation scale. And you can see that in terms of the overall population of the 12 students, the majority, the largest mean was that the students were represented in terms of separation. So they were holding their own country values and separating from the host institution. Second was integration, followed by assimilation and marginalization. One thing to kind of note, there was a really low Chromec Alpha score on integration, so there's a note of caution about that one. I was very interested to kind of see if there would be a difference from the entire group versus separating out mainland China. If you've had the opportunity to visit mainland China or Hong Kong, you know that they're very distinct in terms of the landscape and some of those differences of the two. So the students from China were more assimilated in terms of the U.S. culture, followed by integration, separation, and marginalization. So I really just used the acculturation scale as an addition to try to get a sense of, did what I learned from the interviews, did it fit with where their level of acculturation was? So some of the final discussion pieces, overall just the influence of the media on students' prior knowledge about diversity, the positive effects of diversity courses on students. Much of this is in the literature if you look at Aston and Hurtado and Chang, Mitchell Chang's over at UCLA. Significant peer interactions facilitated by group projects and assignments, and the positive role of the TA. And then students are more open to racial and ethnic groups, gays and lesbians, gender, religion, and U.S. society diversity. There was a strong change in beliefs and stereotypes held prior from interactions with their diverse peers in those courses. And Laird, Inberg, and Hurtado, diversity courses provide a supportive environment to change values and attitudes. Very well represented in the literature. In terms of the friendships, there were general friendships that were built in the courses. Some with domestic students, but still more with Asian and other Asian international students. Something I really was kind of expecting to find in terms of sometimes that comfort zone will still draw you to those that you have a little bit more familiarity with. And it just talks about, friendship potential takes time. If you're only in a semester course, you don't have a huge amount of time to build those strong relationships. And then the acculturation level supported student responses. And it depends on the degree of adaptation within the host country. And secondly, it depends on the contact with domestic students. So what does all of this mean in terms of the study that I worked on? I think, first of all, just support for international students in taking diversity courses. Many of them talked about choosing a course and not really knowing what it was, or what was diversity and why do I need this course. And so some assistance in terms of their course selection and advising to maybe talk to them about what may be a particular course of interest to them, because they really went into it blindly. It's kind of like they got there and was like, oh, this is what it was. And at the end, they realized it was a great benefit and they enjoyed the course, but they had no idea going in some of the things that they would be covering. Changes to the classroom environment. Overall, international students were impacted in these courses when they had the ability to be in smaller classes. So the ability to take that learning and be able to discuss it in a safe environment with their peers. The hands-on delivery of materials and teaching styles. Most of the learning occurred through presentations, debates, interviewing their peers in the classroom. One of the students talked about how they had to watch the film Boys in the Hood, and then get in a small group and kind of talk about that. So if you remember that film, there's a lot of stuff going on in that film. So imagine if you take, a lot of things in popular culture or books or sometimes just an article out of the local paper to give those students a chance to sit back and interact about diversity in politics. One of the students, I remember vividly, she was in the geography course and she was like, wow, I never realized this about LA because I came here kind of knowing about the Hollywood sign. But in her course, she learned about all the different neighborhoods of LA and the migration patterns of who lives at the beaches, who lives in central Los Angeles and who lives in the burbs. So for us, a geography lesson, but for that international student, it was a historical context about diversity in Los Angeles. So, and that was an introductory course. So it speaks to the learning that these students can have in these courses. Challenges still remain for international students to make friends with domestic students. They still prefer to be with students from their own country or from their own region. You know, so how do you balance that in looking at how we want them to embrace the institution, yet knowing that there's a benefit and sometimes a support that comes from their own community, and particularly if it's a language issue as well. And then just looking at, I'd like to just see more future research, you know, less transitional stuff, but more about what our international students doing with civic engagement, with leadership, and just broadening the scope of the literature that's out there. Limitations, always important to recognize those. These are only students from China and Hong Kong, so I wonder what the difference might be if I chose students from a different region of the world. You know, would it be similar, would it differ? The sample size was 12 students, relatively small. Gender composition, and all of us that did qualitative had this issue. We had more females than males. So it speaks to who gets involved, who wants to participate. I only had one male student in my group. The particular campus environment is unique in having the largest number of international students, so that cannot be replicated at maybe some different campuses, as well as the domestic student diversity. The specific diversity course requirements that are here at Western are only unique to this campus, so how might that differ studying at another campus? And then the instrument that I used was a relatively new instrument for about 4 years. So finally, with all of that, what does this maybe mean for you as practitioners? We're often taught to take what we study and research and how does that apply to me as a orientation director, to me as an academic advisor, to me working in a multicultural center. So just wanted to kind of have a small discussion with you and a couple questions I put out here. Diversity education does not simply occur within the classroom. How can student affairs departments implement diversity interventions outside the classroom to benefit students? This might be training sessions, retreats, how we respond to campus conflicts, and then how do we involve international students in some of these experiences? So what's happening on your campus in the realm of diversity outside of the classroom? Yes?
Well, I'm from recreational sports.
Okay.
So you throw out soccer and the whole world comes together. We have Pakistani students playing against, students from India, and World War III does not break out. We had a really great event that was put on by Arvind Varma this last year, where we actually cabled in the World Cricket competition. We had 700 students down at the coffee house watching cricket at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I mean, sports for us, at least, outside of the classroom, really brings the students together.
That's a wonderful example. So how do we get some of those domestic students to go for soccer and cricket?
We tried. We did a introducing cricket to American students, and about 7 students showed up. Very baseball-oriented students, thinking that cricket was exactly like baseball. Not. But we had tons of students, and thanks to International Student Services, many international students were very, very interested in trying to figure out American football.
Thank you. Any other diversity type activities or activities in general that you're trying to embrace international students?
I'm struck by how many of our peer health educators are international students. Of course, there are predominantly female. I mean, we have that the gender issue, but if this is helping me think about our training and how we engage and how we might look at having a graduate engineering student from India as a peer health educator and what that experience is for him versus an undergraduate female student from Orange County. I mean, that there's some pretty different life experience to a certain degree. I mean, to a large degree. But so I never really thought about that as a diversity experience, but it may be.
I think it is. I mean, it's hot. Those students it's a graduate student that may not have otherwise been as engaged, but may be tied to a major. And it's giving them a chance to interact and learn from the peers that they mentor and do training programs with or residence hall presentations with. So I think that's a great example. Thinking a little differently. Good.
Yes, I think this is something that, I'm from athletics, student athlete academic services, and this is an area where I think we tend to struggle a little bit because we have a lot of our student athletes will tend to gravitate towards other student athletes who are from their home countries. So not only, and those tend to be student athletes, so we kind of get a microcosm of what's going on in the general population of students here. And so I think this has been a challenge for us to try to help them to sort of break out of that comfort zone a little bit. I know I work with a lot of students that I try to get them to branch out a little bit more, but they do tend to gravitate towards what's comfortable and what's familiar, which makes sense. I think I would do that if I was in another country myself. But this is something that we sort of struggle with in our department in trying to help them to branch out. And they get some of that with the teams and other student athletes, but again, that's a very small population, and so we're trying to expand that beyond just student athletes. So,
very typical.
Work in
You
progress.
described the subculture and culture
right.
of student athletes. They definitely have their own. But maybe look at where those athletes go in terms of their academic departments and relationships with peers or mentoring types of programs that can come there, relationships with faculty. If they may be able to do any research. We know their schedules are always extremely hectic as student athletes as well. So, thank you for sharing. Yes.
I'm from Marshall School of Business. Our school sends student freshmen. This year we sent about 400 students to overseas. And in this trip we have international students mixed with American students. We go to 11 locations around the world this year. And it's kind of neat to see, especially when we take students to Asian countries like Taiwan or Hong Kong or whatever, and the American students are more interested to learn about that country because they're going. Then they try to find their peers who come from that part of the country, from Hong Kong, Taiwan, or even from what you call Chinese American students, and they learn about culture, they learn about language and all that. It's kind of neat to see that American students more interested to learn more about Asian, and then it's kind of like start conversation between different cultures.
Exchange programs, study abroad programs, and what are they bringing when they come back to the institutions? Great examples. How do we encourage international students to engage in co-curricular experiences to support adjustment and building of peer relationships? And how might this differ for an increasing number of graduate students? Are any of you in particular graduate education programs or departments?
Yeah, Richard School of Engineering,
Okay.
the master's program, which is the largest international program on campus. I mean, the vast majority of our students are international, so almost anything we do, it's, any type of events and things that we have is a cross-population of students. But you still see the aerospace students, talking with only the aerospace students, and the Chinese aerospace students talking only the Chinese aerospace students, and Indian aerospace students talking to each other. So it can get tough to, to get them to talk to students from other countries.
Do they have particular internships or practicum experiences?
A lot of our students do have internships in U.S. companies, and I think that helps a lot. And just having our faculty is also very international, and the TAs, of course, are very international. So they're sort of forced to learn about other cultures. That's how we are.
Hey, I'm from occupational therapy, and I work with students individually. And I just had a student today that's an international student. His goal is to make friends with somebody not from his country, and this comes up a lot. Or date somebody not from their country, which is a bigger challenge. But looking at, I think sometimes they know about certain clubs, they know about places they can go, but really kind of breaking it down with them and doing some goal setting and encouraging. Even talking about like how would you start a conversation, what, you know, where would you go, and so kind of breaking that down and providing that support. So I find that helps as long as the university is also providing all those great venues to meet new students as well.
I know I was excited to see the, I guess the session after was looking at an orientation program. There's actually a course to help deal with some of those adjustment issues in American culture and everything. So maybe we'll get some great ideas from that presentation. Yes.
I just have a question about the domestic population versus the international population. Do you find that because the diversity coursework is a mandatory requirement, you find that the change in the domestic students in terms of their attitudes towards diversity is the same as those of the international students coming into that same kind of coursework?
I would say no. And there was one particular study that was actually one of the findings that put primarily Caucasian students that sometimes did have a bit of regression in terms of their wanting to engage or embrace diversity issues. So it can be a challenge, not for the entire population. And also depending on, some students found courses that were maybe greater aligned to what some of their interests were in terms of their major, and those students had a stronger alignment. But it kind of goes back to how do we help those students choose a course, and not only international students, but should that be discussed for all students in the advising. We have this requirement, but we want to make sure it's a course that you might really have an interest in learning more about. You know, are you a humanities person? Are you social sciences? Because they come in a breadth of courses with a lot of different areas of focus. But that was one of the studies.
Yeah, part of the, I think maybe part of the big impact is that because it's mandatory, it's something that you have to do, there's going to be a large lump there that is going to go unwillingly into the course. And how they turn out at the end, I'm not sure.
I think we also found some differences depending on what year they took their course.
Yeah.
In terms of freshman, sophomore versus if you wait until you were junior or senior. So those are some of the nuances as well. And if you have an interest in maybe gaining some greater insights into the other 6 or 7 studies, I'd be happy to share some of the information with Dr. Toby. They also have copies of my presentation. If you would like to have a copy of this, she can also provide that to you. Thank you all very much.